You might be familiar with the phrase time of supply. What does time of supply mean? Well, time of supply is a relevant measure under the GST law for every transaction entered into by a supplier of goods or services. It refers to the point in time when goods have been deemed to be supplied or services have been deemed to be provided, and the liability to pay taxes on those goods or services arises at the very point in time. But how does one determine the time of supply? Hello and welcome. I am AJ from Clear, from the makers of Clear Tax. It is India's largest tax and financial services platform. Clear serves more than 3,000 large enterprises and more than 4 lakh growing businesses. If you would like to get clear explanations of updates relating to GST, e-invoicing, EI bills and more, then please subscribe to our channel. Determining the time of supply varies for both goods and services under GST. First, let's understand how to determine the time of supply in case of goods. So, the time of supply in the case of goods will be the earliest of three dates. Number one, the date of issue of invoice by the supplier, or number two, the last date on which the invoice should have been issued under section 31(1) of the CGST Act, or number three, the date of receipt of payment with respect to that supply. Before I give you an example, let's take a look at what section 31(1) of CGST Act says. A registered person supplying taxable goods shall issue a tax invoice in such manner as may be prescribed before or at the time of number 1. Removal of goods for supply to the recipient in case where the supply involves movement of goods, or number 2. Delivery of goods or making the goods available to the recipient in other cases. This means that the last date for supplier to issue an invoice in case of supply of goods is before or at the time of removal of goods or at the time of delivery, depending on whether the transaction involves movement of goods or not. So now let's understand time of supply of goods with the help of an example. Mr. X sold goods to Mr. Y worth 1 lakh. The invoice was issued on 15th January. The goods were supplied on 20th January and the payment was received on 31st January. Let's analyze the time of supply in this case. The time of supply would be earliest of number 1, date of issue of invoice, that is 15th January. Number 2, last date on which the invoice should have been issued as per section 31(1), that is at the time of supply of goods, that is 20th January. Number 3, date on which payment was received, that is 31st January. Since the earliest of above three dates is 15th January, the time of supply will be the 15th January. Next, let's move on to the time of supply of services. In the case of services as well, the time of supply would be the earliest of three dates. Number 1, the date of issue of the invoice. If the invoice is issued within the prescribed period under section 31(2) of the CGST Act, or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, or number 2, the date of provision of services when the invoice is not issued within the prescribed period, or the date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Number 3, the date on which the recipient shows the receipt of services in his or her books of account in cases where the provisions of above two clauses do not apply. Before I proceed to the example, let me tell you what section 31(2) of the CGST Act says. According to section 31(2) of the CGST Act, the prescribed time limit for issuance of an invoice in case of taxable supply of services is 30 days from the date of supply. Moving on, let's understand the time of supply of services with the help of an example. Mr. A provides services worth 20,000 to Mr. B on 1st January. The invoice was issued on 20th January and the payment for the same was received on 1st February. In the present case, we need to first check if the invoice was issued within the prescribed time period. The prescribed time period is 30 days from the date of supply, that is 31st January. The invoice was issued on 20th January. This means that the invoice was issued within a prescribed time limit. Next, let's analyze the time of supply. The time of supply will be the earliest of number 1, the date of issue of invoice, that is 20th January. Number 2, the date of payment, 1st February. In this case, the time of supply of services will be 20th January. So we do not need to consider the date of provision of services here since the invoice was issued within the prescribed period. Next, let's understand the time of supply for reverse charge supplies. But before I proceed, let me remind you to type in your GST queries in the comment section below. Our experts will answer them for you. The time of supply in the case of reverse charge supplies again varies for goods and services. In the case of reverse charge supply of goods, the time of supply will be the earliest of number 1, the date of receipt of goods, or number 2, the date of payment as entered in the books of accounts of the recipient, or the date on which the payment is debited in their bank account, whichever is earlier, or number 3, the date immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. Whereas, in the case of reverse charge supply of services, the time of supply will be the earliest of number 1, the date of payment as entered in the books of accounts of the recipient, or the date on which payment is debited in their bank account, whichever is earlier, or number 2, the date immediately following 60 days from the date of issue of invoice by the supplier. Let's understand this with the help of an example. Mrs. ABC Private Limited undertook service of a director, Mr. X, worth 50,000 on 15th January. The invoice was raised on 1st February. Mr. ABC Private Limited made the payment on 1st May. Since this is a service, the time of supply will be earliest of two dates. Number 1, date of payment, that is 1st May. Number 2, 60 days from the date of invoice, that is 2nd April. Hence, the time of supply of services here will be 2nd April. Next, moving on to the vouchers, the time of supply would be number 1, the date of issue of voucher if the supply is identifiable at that point, or number 2, the date of redemption of voucher in all other cases. Lastly, what about in cases where the time of supply cannot be determined? Well, in this case, the time of supply would be number 1. In a case where a periodical return has to be filed, then the date on which such return is to be filed. Or number 2, in any other case, be the date on which the tax is paid. So, would you like to know about a GST solution that helps you file error-free GST returns and detect and claim 100% input tax credit? Well, it's time you to check out the Clear GST software. It is India's most trusted GST solution and offers users many exclusive features that assure 100% accurate GST returns and 100% ITC claims. With Clear GST software, you can connect with hundreds of ERPs and import data error-free. You can also file returns from GSTR 1 to 9C and more, made at least 3x faster. You can match 6,000 invoices in a minute and detect 100% tax credits with AI-powered matching. Also, you can get 2 to 7% tax savings with smart reconciliation and reports. You can get multiple validations done at each step, reviewed by over 60 experts. And you can choose from a variety of smart analytical reports on tap and much more. If you would like a demo of the Clear GST software, please click on the link in the description below and enter your contact details. One of our product experts will schedule a demo at your convenience. Well, we are now at the end of this video. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. Also, please don't forget to click on the link in the description below to explore the Clear GST software for quick and error-free GST returns. Thank you.